Good evening. Good evening, councillors, officers, members of the public, and those that are joining us perhaps from home. Welcome to the Planning Committee on Tuesday, the 25th of March 2023. First part of the agenda, item 1. Do we have any apologies? I have one apology from Councillor Jill Burnett-Faulkner, who's substituted by Councillor Stephen Sweeney. Do I have any more apologies? That's negative. Item 2 on the agenda brings us to declarations of interest. To receive declarations of interest from members on items included in the agenda. Do we have any declarations this evening? And that's also negative. Thank you. Item 3 brings us on to the minutes of the previous meeting that were convened on the 25th of February 2025. Are we content that that was a true and accurate recording of proceedings that evening? If so, can I see a show of hands in support of that? That's unanimous. Thank you. Did you wish to make a comment, Councillor Gordon?
Roger.
Okay. Okay. That brings us on to the first substantive item on the agenda tonight. Item 4, which is pages 5 to 22 on your agenda pack. Application for major development, the land at Slacken Lane, Gleeson Regeneration Limited. I believe we have a presentation on that. Over to you, Charles.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. So this application seeks full planning permission for 170 dwellings, including 43 affordable homes with associated access and landscaping at land off Slacken Lane. So for context, the site is located at the end of Slacken Lane, which joins onto Congleton Road. Part of the site is brownfield. However, due to the lack of management of the site, it now appears as a semi-natural landscape. So this is the layout for the development. The proposal would comprise of a mixture of detached and semi-detached houses, which would be 2-storey and 2.5-storey in height. An area of open space is proposed close to the entrance of the site along the southwestern boundary, and an attenuation basin along with a smaller area of open space would be located towards the northeast. So here are some examples of the proposed dwellings. This is a detached 3-bedroom property. The properties would be constructed in a mixture of brick and render with dark tile roofs. There would be some detailing on the properties around the windows and doors, and there would be some different brick types used to create some further visual interest. Here's an example of a pair of semi-detached properties. They're both 3-bed. And these are some of the street scene elevations which show how the mixture of housing types would look when put together. So we do have some photos of the site, but it's not the easiest site to get any wide shots from, as it's mostly shrubland with semi-mature trees. Now, moving on to the assessment of the proposal, there are no issues in principle to the proposed development, given that it would utilise a semi-brownfield site within an existing urban area of the borough. It's in a location that has good access to local services and facilities. It's also recognised that the proposal would make a good contribution to the council's housing supply and would provide a number of affordable homes. However, there are a number of issues with the proposal which weigh against these benefits. So the first of these relates to the use of the unadopted highway of Slacken Lane as the main and only vehicle route into the site. So improvements are proposed to the road to bring it up to an adoptable standard, which would include repairs and additional hard standing and new pavements. But due to the width of the road, a one-way priority give-way system would be used. So the Highways Authority have noted that this arrangement would mean that in the event of a partial blockage of the road, access into the site wouldn't be achievable. So further to this, there's no guarantee that the applicant could achieve full rights to the road in the future. So there is a process to change private roads to an adoptable standard, but this process is applied at the Highway Authority's discretion, and it's typically only done where there's a risk of objection is minimal. So in this case, as can be seen from the number of objections to the application, the proposal to change Slacken Lane to an adopted road would likely be met with objections from residents of the street. The Highways Authority have also raised concerns with visibility displays and the offsetting of on-street parking from Slacken Lane. So the use of Slacken Lane itself would also have an impact on nearby properties, in particular the property titled the Hawthorns and number 34 Pickwick Place, which have their main gardens facing directly onto the proposed access road. So the increase of vehicle movements past these rear gardens would lead to a loss of privacy, an increase of noise levels due to the low-level boundary wall of the Hawthorns, and a close proximity of number 34 Pickwick Place to Slacken Lane. So once you could use an acoustic barrier or wall to help mitigate some of these impacts, this in turn would result in an adverse visual impact on this part of Slacken Lane, which is characterised by low-level boundary treatments, meaning a solution can't be controlled through a condition or alteration of the scheme. Officers also consider that the tree loss from the site is unacceptable. So details submitted in support of the application note that the loss of trees would not be fully mitigated by the new planting. And whilst it's understood that some tree loss would always be required to develop the site, no attempts to retain trees from the centre of the site have been demonstrated within the application. So the loss of trees and the lack of soft landscaping provided within the scheme, in combination with large areas of hard standing and car-dominated layouts, is also recommended as a separate reason for refusal. So the last recommended reason for refusal relates to drainage matters. Essentially, there's still outstanding objections from the lead local flood authority, which haven't been addressed. So to conclude, whilst the benefits of the proposal are acknowledged, there are a number of matters which weigh against the proposal. These relate to highway safety, loss of trees, unacceptable design, residential amenity, and drainage. So given these concerns, the application is therefore brought to committee with a recommendation for refusal. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. Just before we go any further, just on a bit of housekeeping. We haven't been made aware of an alarm call tonight, but if the alarm does sound, can you please make your way quietly and efficiently through the doors there and meet at the front of the building. I should have done that at the beginning, but I've done it now just in case. Hope it isn't tempting fate. Okay, going on to the, we've got 3 speakers on this item. We've got 2 objectors and a supporter. The first speaker is Ward Councillor Sylvia Diamond. Would you like to approach the committee, please? Councillor Diamond, you have 5 minutes to make your case. You'll be reminded after 4 minutes by the clerk. 1 minute left. You may begin when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Charles, and thank you, members. Can I thank you for the opportunity to support the officer's recommendation to refuse planning permission for the proposed major development by Gleeson Regeneration Limited at Slacken Lane, application number 240089 FUL. This application seeks to erect 170 dwellings on a site that presents several significant challenges and concerns, which I will outline. Firstly, highway safety is a paramount concern. The applicant has failed to demonstrate that a safe and suitable means of access to the site can be achieved. The proposed access route via Slacken Lane is inadequate, with varying widths and poor conditions, lacking segregated footways and street lighting. The Highways Authority has refused fundamental objections, noting that the access road does not meet the required technical standards and poses a risk to both vehicular and pedestrian safety. Secondly, the proposed development does not meet the standards of highway quality residential design. The high density of the development, combined with parking dominant layouts, excessive hard standing at the front of the properties, results in an overly urban character that is out of place with the surrounding suburban area. The lack of soft landscaping and green spaces within the central part of the site further exacerbates this issue, leading to a development that feels cramped and overdeveloped. Thirdly, the impact on residential amenity cannot be overlooked. The proposed access arrangements would lead to increased noise and loss of privacy for the residents of the Hawthorns, number 34 Pickwick Place. The significant increase in vehicular movements past these properties would adversely affect their quality of life. and no satisfactory mitigation measures have been proposed. Furthermore, the environmental impact of this development is concerning. The proposal would result in the loss of a significant number of visual important trees, which contribute to the character of the area and support local wildlife habitats. The application has not provided sufficient justification for the tree loss, nor have they demonstrated how they would compensate for the loss of biodiversity. Additionally, the proposed drainage system is inadequate. Insufficient information has been provided to demonstrate that a suitable and sustainable drainage system can be incorporated into the scheme. This raises concerns about the potential flood risks and the long-term sustainability of the development. In conclusion, while the provision of new housing is important, it must not come at the expense of safety, quality and environmental sustainability. The adverse impact of this proposal on highway safety, residential amenity, environmental quality and drainage significantly outweighs the benefits of providing additional housing. Therefore, I urge you to support the officer's recommendation and refuse the planning permission for this development. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Diamond. Next, we have an objector, Mr. Frank Lafferty. Are you, can you please address the committee, please? Same rules apply. You have 5 minutes to make your case. You may begin when ready. You just need to press the button in front of you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you and good evening. I represent all the residents of Slacking Lane who wish to unanimously object to this development. Council, please note there has been no consultation with residents other than a glossy flyer posted a year ago through selected letterboxes. Slacking Lane is in private ownership for a substantial part of its length from the junction of the A34. Lane residents and those of Congleton Road have maintained and enjoyed unhindered access. The note dated 13/1/25 by Ward Hadaway regarding using the PSWC and Section 228 of the Highway Act 1980 to facilitate the lane is for the sole purpose of gaining access to the development site. More specifically, the use of language we perceive as being both threatening and intimidatory towards residents. And I quote, "It is hoped that the possibility of being subject to significant costs in making up Slacking Lane may motivate the frontagers to reach some agreement." They then suggest the developer offers to finance the council's legal costs. Legislation quoted in the note from the 19th century was originally intended to address matters of public health, not to empower an absentee landlord or developer to line their pockets. Slacking Lane narrows to a width to where no more than one vehicle at a time can safely pass. Here, they wish to invoke a traffic priority scheme with no regard to the existing driveway at the Shires, that's number 17, and it totally fails to mention arrangements for the private roadway to numbers 19 through 29. Throughout here, there is no visibility display in existence. Number 15 has to reverse into her driveway for safety reasons. Change this to traffic coming from two directions and it will be a nightmare and inherently dangerous. 170 homes, potentially 340 vehicles on paper, and just a desktop exercise has been submitted. Where's the factual data and evidence recording all existing journeys along the lane and the waiting time to exit onto the A34? In my day as a serving police officer and fatal collision investigator, where's the Golden River traffic counting digital recorded data? Try exiting the junction in peak traffic periods where the main A34 flow is governed by the lights at Red Bull, Cedar Avenue, and indeed as far as the Toby Carvery. Add in the regular scenario of a major road traffic incident on the A500, the A50, and as far as the M6, when Butt Lane becomes the diversion route for traffic. The arterial roads are suddenly overwhelmed. Not to mention the abnormal load movements where Staffordshire Police pass over the load convoy directly to Cheshire Police at Slacking Lane. The lane is completely shut. No one's getting in or out for quite some time. You don't need a desktop study. As a police motorcyclist, I policed it. Blackhead Lane has an established and documented history of flooding, with an essential culvert barely 1.5 metres beneath the road surface, extending the full length of the lane, carrying water from Cloughall Park and beyond. The applicant proposes to upgrade initially the lane to a standard whereby they can use the lane for site access, for HGVs and earth-moving equipment as needed, to flatten and level the entire site, and thereafter construction. How will all the current residents of Slacking Lane be afforded their rightful continuous access on foot or by vehicle to their homes? How will essential services to and from these properties be maintained? How will refuse, delivery vehicles and emergency services be permitted access when required 24/7? Where will the numerous private vehicles driven by contractors themselves be parked?
1 minute.
Gleason's reports there is no evidence of standing or pooling water or even the 3 existing ponds which have existed there for certainly over 50 years. No mention either of the flooding I reported to Council in January of this year. We're discussing the total destruction of an area that is without argument totally green. Forget labels of greenfield and brownfield. Nature has reclaimed this site over a period in excess of 100 years from the scars of the mining industry and since later contaminated waste deposits from the red ash of the steel industry. It's proposing decimation of the treescape, their only offering being, in their own words, to retain trees where possible. Judging by the sudden, unannounced and discourteous arrival of contractors last year and their destruction of shrubbery, bushes and the chainsawing of trees showing total disregard to the ecology of flora and fauna, I put it tonight to committee that no trees will be saved where possible, but rather every excuse used to justify their removal to maximise profit. I could easily talk all night on many more deeply concerning topics, but my allotted 5 minutes, I believe, is all but complete. Thank you for patiently listening.
Thank you, Mr. Lafferty. You may rejoin the audience, please. Thank you. The next speaker on this item is a supporter of the scheme, Mr. Liam O'Sullivan, who I believe is acting for the agent. Would you like to approach the committee, please? You also have 5 minutes to make a case. You may begin when you're ready.
Good evening. Gleason Homes would like to respectfully request that the committee consider a deferral of our application to allow our team to work with your officers to address the following in respect to the proposed reasons for refusal. Refusal reason number 1. There's been no update from Staff's County Highways response since the consultee reply on the 25th of July 2024. That was prior to the subsequent work submitted seeking to address the issues raised by the Highway Authority consultee on 8th of Jan 2025. We submitted a technical note regarding highways access legal issues along with a revised proposal site access drawing. In reply, SCC simply reconfirmed that they will have concerns. They still have concerns, but if proactive discussions were held, we firmly believe these concerns can be overcome. Refusal reason number 2. The planning officer has not discussed the detail of these concerns with us prior to finalising this report, and we consider that there could well be amendments acceptable to Gleason that would go towards addressing these concerns. Refusal reason number 3. The planning officer has not discussed details of these concerns with us prior to finalising his report. This refusal specifically refers to noise impact upon the properties of Hawthorns, number 34 Pickwick Place. These points were not raised in the environmental health consultee replies from March and September 2024. So we have not been able to consider these and would like time to understand and seek to address these. Ecological surveys have been carried out and it is accepted that trees and scrubland would be unavoidably removed, but replacement planting would occur and tree removal should be balanced against the provision of 170 homes in a sustainable location. Reason number 5. This relates to flood risk and is on the basis of a consultee requiring more information than a principal objection. There was an updated flood risk consultee reply on the 11th of March, and as we would request time to understand and seek to address this, with some additional details provided, we consider this can be overcome. Gleeson Homes focuses on bringing forward brownfield and technically challenging sites, enabling the provision of homes that are affordable to local people. This site once comprised colliery spoil and is within the urban area, surrounded by the built environment. It contains mine shafts and contamination, which left undeveloped will present unresolved public health issues, continued fly tipping, and along with Staffordshire Police having reports of antisocial behaviour, including motorbike users here. Our proposal would decontaminate the site and provide 170 homes for local people within walking distance of Kids Grove Town Centre, of which 43 homes would be affordable. All homes would have parking spaces and private gardens. Street trees would be provided along with on-site leap and lap, and site-wide landscaping in addition to an improved site access for existing residents. Government policy requires us to significantly boost the supply of housing, especially on brownfield lands such as this. The council has a significant shortfall in its 5-year housing land supply, and the tilted balance applies, and benefits must outweigh harm. Officers and members will be aware of this because of recent appeal successes by other developers who focus on easy greenfield sites in the open countryside. That isn't our approach. As a reminder, the council's own data shows there are 2,531 households waiting on the affordable homes register in the borough. We are offering to provide 43 of these and to make clean and safe a degraded, scruffy and contaminated piece of land in the urban area, and to also make up the road to an adoptable standard. Whilst we are frustrated that your officers have found fault with this proposal, we consider that the issues can be resolved. On that basis, I respectfully ask members to defer their decision this evening and allow us more time to address the matters so that the application can come back to you with a more favourable recommendation. Thank you ever so much.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. I'd like at this point to invite officers to come back on those points, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. So in respect of deferring the application, most of the reasons for refusal, with the exceptions of the flood risk issue, are essentially fundamental in nature. So regardless of how much information that is submitted in support of the application, this is not going to overcome the issues. I mean, the Highways Authority, for the meetings I've had with them, have simply said that due to Slacken Lane not being adopted, due to its width, they're never going to be in a position to support it. So deferring the application is just going to delay the inevitable, really. The impact on the amenity goes hand in hand with the use of Slacken Lane. You know, you could create an acoustic fence or perhaps a barrier to help those issues, but then that in itself creates visual harm. So there's not a practical solution we can see because it still relates to the use of Slacken Lane. With respect of trees and design, the council's landscape team have submitted objections to this pretty much from the start of the application. No attempt has been made by the applicant since that point to change the scheme or to alter it. And, you know, officers has also raised concerns with the loss of trees even prior to an application being submitted during the pre-application process as well. So these aren't new matters. More than that, it's been close to a year without any meaningful progress being made on the application. The drainage matter, I agree, could be addressed through the submission of additional information, but it's still been a year. Additional information has been provided and no breakthroughs occurred. And essentially, we can't hold on to the application indefinitely. So officers wouldn't recommend that it's deferred. They would stick with their recommendation that the application is refused.
Thank you, Charles. I'll now pass it on to members for comment. Councillor Fear.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. With a somewhat heavy heart, I think I want to urge that we accept our officer's recommendations this evening. On the face of it, this is an ideal site for development. The council tried very hard to develop on brownfield wherever possible. But as our officer has outlined, there seem to be with this proposal some insurmountable problems, and that they're not problems which really can be fixed given where we are. I was in particular concerned about the highways issues. Here we've got a road which is clearly, I think, substandard for the size of development that we're looking at. I worry about it in a variety of ways. First, I think the width of the road is going to be a major problem. Heaven forfend, if there is a major accident here, I can't see how emergency vehicles will get efficiently to the site where they're needed in an appropriate amount of time. I also worry, and members of the committee who've been on it with me for some time will know this, and I look to my colleague, Councillor Hutchinson, at this point as well. I worry about refuse collection at this point. Refuse vehicles are large. This lane is small. I also worry in that respect about two other things. One is the engineering of this road. It seems to me that were such vehicles to pass over it on a regular basis, which they will have to, it will start to disintegrate. And if what we've heard this evening, and I look to our officers for confirmation of this, is that if beneath that road there is a very important culvert, the collapse of that road could be absolutely appalling in that regard. So although I think I wouldn't want to object to this, and I think our officers didn't want to object to this in terms of the principle of development of the site, which seems to me an ideal site to develop, the nature of these proposals is such that I cannot see how the problems outlined can be ameliorated. I think we have to go back and think about something else here. As has been pointed out, and I noted in the report when I read it, when it first came out, there's been an awful long gap between when the first cut-off date was and the agreed date at the end of this month. We heard that the council has done very little in that time, but actually it's not for the council to do those things. It is for the developer, if they are keen on the development, to take that forward and to ensure that there are replies. And I haven't seen any evidence that there has been a lot in the way of proactive activity from the developer here, although we've had a little bit of a blame game this evening. So, as I say, it's with a bit of a heavy heart, because I think this is the sort of site we should be looking for development. It's brownfield, it's sustainable, but in terms of this actual proposal, I can't see any way round the recommendations that are in front of us, and therefore I would urge colleagues, in fact, to go with those recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Fear. Do we have any other councillors wishing to speak on this item? Councillor Hutchinson.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I agree with everything Councillor Fear has just said. I don't see any comments in the report regarding from the recycling and waste team. How are the recycling and waste trucks going to get to the 170 houses? And if the road's substandard, then that's not a very good starting point. The trucks leave the depot about 6 in the morning, so that they'll arrive in Kidsgrove, possibly 6:30, 7 o'clock, maybe, as people are trying to go to work. And if there's a truck on a very, very small, narrow road, nobody's going to get out of the development because they can't get past the truck. So they're all going to have to plan to leave extra early or wait until the truck's been and gone. The other part of the report that I'm not comfortable with is the loss of the trees. There doesn't seem to have been any work or options to try and save some trees. From the arboricultural impact assessment, all the trees are graded between A and C, and I cannot support any development where there's any loss of grade A and grade B trees. So at the moment, I'm inclined to go with the officers, which is to refuse the application for the two reasons: the trees, and also I would have to be convinced that the recycling and waste had been thoroughly gone into and there was a concrete plan that was workable. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Fear.
I think you mean
Councillor
Councillor Holland, Mr. Chairman.
I realised as soon as I said that one, Councillor Fear. I apologise.
Thank you, Chair. Happy to second Councillor Fear's proposal of the recommendations as printed. I can place on record my thanks to the resident and to the ward member for arriving at the council meeting, at the planning committee meeting this evening. It is helpful to hear from local people. I would have spoken out much sooner in regards to the proposal that's been made by the applicant's representative for a deferral, but from what I've heard, this authority has properly discharged its duty to cooperate in a positive and proactive manner with the applicant on this one, and the defects in the application are so severe that I don't think any of us tonight would be prepared to vote for a deferral over the recommendations that are in front of us. So those are seconded. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Holland. That's noted. Any other councillors wishing to speak? Councillor Williams, John.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with everything that's been said. I mean, it's over-intensification of this particular site. But what really concerns me, the over-intensification, a small matter of the public right-of-way that's been addressed, but really the developer hasn't come in and said that he would make that public right-of-way suitable for people to walk through. I think it's in a very poor condition, but the developer has mentioned that it opens the gate to go to Kids Grove Town Centre. So that's just a small matter, but really on the highways, and it concerns me, our old friend, the highways, and really what they say, the Highways Authority raised fundamental concerns that the access route to the public highway is not included with the red edge application boundary and therefore does not demonstrate that a suitable means of access can be provided to support the major developments. So I'd like the officers just to decipher that for me, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you want to come back on that?
Sure. So with regards to the red line, the applicants requested that the red line for the site be altered so that it covers the entirety of Second Lane all the way up to Congleton Road. The issue with this is that the local authority do allow for changes to red lines of applications, but it's normally at our discretion. It's usually only where it's very, very small alterations, so perhaps a couple of metres to incorporate something like a boundary dispute, for example. In this case, the red line would have to be extended around sort of 70 metres. And in doing that, we would then have to consult neighbours and residents who were never consulted on the original application. And it's just not in accordance with the way we normally approach these matters. So for that reason, we're not willing to change the red line on the site. If the applicant did want to do that, they'd have to submit a new application, essentially.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, but again, as has been said tonight, it is so narrow. It should have to be traffic lights system, and really, you know, emergency vehicles going down there wouldn't be able to do their work. And of course, it's been mentioned about the refuge wagons. So thank you. I'll go with the.
Thank you, Councillor Williams.
I'll go. Recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other councillors wishing to speak on this? Councillor Brown.
Just to say, I agree with what Councillor Fear said about having a heavy heart. As somebody that spends a lot of time trying to help people find social housing, it is regrettable when we see that the 25% social housing proposed is in such an unsuitable site, an unsafe site. So it would be with regret, but I completely accept the points made by the officers.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Any other comments? Can I just check with Councillors Fear and Holland that that you're recommending refusal and seconding the refusal on the basis of the recommendations printed in the report?
Yes, that's correct, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I understand it is with a heavy heart. We do need particularly affordable housing, but it has to be the right design in the right place. And I think I would have been inclined to support this if there'd been a creative way of addressing the highways issues of access. I don't see that here. So I'll be inclined to vote with the recommendation also. So it's been formally proposed by Councillor Fear and seconded by Councillor Holland. Can I see a show of hands in support of that? As printed in your agenda pack. Thank you. And that's unanimous. Thank you, councillors. That item fails and is refused. Thank you. Right. Okay, next item on the agenda is application for minor development, Clyde Beach Motors, Pit Green Lane, Woolstanton. Over to you, Anna.
Thank you, Chairman. So agenda item 5, it's the existing site car repairs business on Pit Green Lane and land off George Street as outlined on the location plan, the red line. So there's the two parcels of land, the existing building and the area to the north that's alongside George Street and onto Keeling Street. At the moment, it is an existing business that's still operating, and the proposal is for student accommodation for 16 students with associated parking and amenity. All matters are reserved. It's an outline application, but they have provided some indicative plans. So you can see that the area that the existing car repair business is located on would be where the building would be. And then the area with access onto George Street and Keeling Street would be where the car parking is for up to 8 vehicles is what they're proposing, with some cycle parking and bin storage. As I say, this is an indicative layout, and there have been some comments raised from Highways with regards to that layout maybe not being a suitable option. So whilst all matters are reserved, the applicants provided an indicative street scene. And again, this is just what could potentially be provided on the site. So it's quite a prominent corner. So the design and the scale is very important in an area where it's predominantly terraced properties and quite high density development. So that would be the building on the site fronting onto Pit Green Lane. So in terms of the reserved matters, if that application came in, it would be important that it's designed appropriately in terms of the scale, massing, height, to reflect the character and appearance of the area, and also to protect residential amenity. The properties on Keeling Street, there's quite a limited separation distance between the rear of the proposed building and where those properties are located. So there's a few site photos of the location at the moment, the 2-storey element, and then there's a few other buildings attached to it. And there are a number of parking, kind of on-street parking issues at the moment. That's a view looking down towards George Street and then onto Keeling Street as well. So at the moment, I think that area that's proposed for the parking is being used by the car repairs business for parking. And then there's obviously on-street parking associated with the terraced housing. So these photos were taken in January, kind of early afternoon. There are some parking constraints, but I'd refer members to the supplementary report. Following submission of additional information, the Highways engineer has agreed they no longer have objections subject to conditions, given that the application is for outline with all matters reserved. So again, these are indicative plans. So this is possibly how the front elevation onto Pit Green and the side would look. And and the general layout for the floor plans. It's similar to a scheme in 2019, which has lapsed. It's in a sustainable location. Therefore, the principle of development is acceptable, subject to appropriate conditions as set out in the supplementary report. It's an appropriate scheme. It could be designed appropriately to comply with planning policy, in keeping with the character of the area, and overcome the concerns raised with regards to residential amenity and highway safety through the careful design. A condition could be imposed to restrict it to 2.5 story building. And in terms of the concerns, the building may not remain as a student use and student accommodation. We could also put a condition to restrict that and ensure that it doesn't change from student accommodation. So our recommendation is for approval subject to the conditions set out in the supplementary report.
Thank you, Anna, for that comprehensive report. Before I hand it over to members, we've got two speakers on this item. We've got an objector and a supporter, so I'll take the objector first. Mr. Robert Heaney, would you like to come forward, please? Mr. Heaney, you have 5 minutes to address the committee. You may begin when you're ready.
Good evening. I'm Robert. I'm pretty much out of my comfort zone here, so I hope you're patient with me. I just wanted to thank you for letting me speak here tonight. The information that you sent to me through the posts, through the emails, on the website has been absolutely fantastic. I can't praise you enough for that. It's absolutely brilliant. The recent statement as to how the local planning authority has worked in dealing with this planning application, I found that very helpful. Planning permission has been refused here before in 2018. Reserved matters were not addressed in 2019. The 3-story building is now down to 2.5, which I still feel is still a little bit too high. But the big thing to come from this is we are so pleased that the officers have proposed a condition to restrict the use of this building to student accommodation. And I would get back to that. We think it is not sympathetic or respectful to the character and history of the area. Woolstanton is not a student residential area. Students have this tendency to sort of work in communities. Staffordshire University, the students there, they form around Shelton and Hanley, where the cheap accommodation is. Keele University, they've got fantastic accommodation at Keele, but it's very expensive. So you find that the students' communities there will be around Silverdale and Newcastle, where they have the 25 bus service there is absolutely fantastic. It really is, serving Newcastle, Silverdale and the university. It's absolutely brilliant for the students. We don't have anything like that in Woolstanton. Students, my wife and I work with students all our lives. My wife is the chemistry science coordinator there. Between the end, at the end of June, all of July, August and September, students disappear. They just go home. The accommodation up at Keele is empty. Well, so what's going to happen with this plan during the summer? Is it going to remain half empty? I also read that it is considered that the removal of the existing motor service business, which could be intensified, and its replacement with residential use would result in less noise and disturbance. Now, we have lived beside a garage there for 40 years. We've known that garage to be really productive, working on cars. They even had body work with the ambulance service. They used to reply. We've never had any problems with them. The gentleman who's there at the moment is only there for a few hours, a few days a week. So the community there just cannot give him the business. They just cannot depend on him. The plan is obviously for the 16 student accommodations there, and it's such a small area, and 16 students trying to live in joy and harmony and peace. I'll tell you, because with the garage, from 8 o'clock till 6 o'clock, Monday to Friday, maybe a few hours at the weekend. That's what we get. No problems at night. But these students, potentially 24/7, 16 students trying to live in harmony there. I have worries about that. I just wanted quickly to bring up the Equality Act as well. It is considered that there will be no differential impact on those with protective characteristics. You just walk across the road, 20 yards across the road is a special needs facility. And these people do have special needs. We have welcomed them into our community. It's a wonderful place. During spring and summer, they are walking their clients around the streets there, giving them exercises. They're always waving over the fence, asking us how we're doing, or are we all right, etc., etc. And we have no problems with them. But when they kick off, and they do, anything can upset these people. It is frightening. Thankfully, we have very little of that. With regards, obviously, this application, as yet we haven't had the opportunity to see any of the plans for the 2.5-storey, but which we look forward to receiving the served matters on that. In the Sentinel last night, we had a picture, I think it was a three-storey picture of the building, and the Sentinel stated that the Borough Council planners are recommending the members of the planning committee to approve the outline.
Mr. Heaney, can you conclude your comments, please?
Pardon?
Can you conclude your comments, please? The 5 minutes has expired. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. Sorry, just conclude. Look, in conclusion, they cited the time to build here. Look, Woolstanton is not a student residential area. We know it, you know it, they know it. So we are very concerned about who's going to be put into this property. And we also want to know, obviously, because when the students arrive, which they will not, other people will be put in there, which they will, and we want to know who will be held accountable for that. We would love for that garage to be up and running, get planning permission for that.
Thank you, Mr. Heaney. Time, please.
Please, we're asking you, don't do this to us. It's just silly to have student accommodation here. Thank you very much. I'm sorry I took more 5 minutes.
Next, we have a supporter of the scheme, Mr. Phil Taylor, who's the agent for the application. Thank you.
Good evening, Chair. Good evening, elected members. My name's Phil Taylor. I'm the director of TNT Architectural Design, and we've been working on this scheme now best part of 6-7 years to redevelop the site. Our client came to us circa 2018, I think it was, with a view to providing new homes and facilities for residents within a residential area. Currently, you've got a rundown, disused, disrepaired sort of unit that is situated in a residential zone that's completely alien to the environment that it sits in. And be honest with you, some of the cars that you see on the waste ground to the side are not the best of sort of visual sort of thing that I would like to see outside my house. And as a result of that, we were requested to initially put together a scheme for new housing and so forth with the developer. And in 2019, after a few applications that went forward and a lot of discussion with planning officers, we came up with a suitable scheme that would adhere to all the parameters that are required for good housing and accommodation for students within this area. Now, our client, he is experienced in terms of student accommodation, and they've undertaken a number of substantial schemes within the area and the location in Newcastle and also in Stoke as well. And in terms of the demand for something like this, I think it would benefit greatly the local economy. Where we're located, we're quite close to, you know, the retail areas and the pubs and as I say, this could benefit Woolstanton. You know, I mean, we were all sort of 20 somethings some time ago, and I know for a fact, you know, it wasn't all 24/7 partying and disruption and you know, the young ones revisited. It's not far, you know, it's not that type of environment that we're creating here. It's a residential area, and we're promoting, you know, good sustainable sort of use for that site that marries in with the demographic of the area. And also what we need to sort of realise that in 2019, this was actually approved, and it was all accepted. There was no issues in terms of the elected members to be you know, to take this forward, and it was passed. And essentially what we've got here now is the similar sort of thing to what actually was approved in 2019. Nothing different, and there's nothing different in terms of this application to that application. And as far as I can see, as it stands at the moment, the entire policies of the borough and how the planning is utilised is exactly the same. So I hope that you could support this application and, you know, welcome this into Woolstanton and provide a positive thing that we can report on within the borough. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. May you rejoin your chair, please. Before we go on, I'll just invite officers to come back on any of the points that are raised first.
Thank you, Chairman. So I think the agent was referring to the application in 2018, which was refused. That was 2 buildings with 8 apartments and 4 student units. And then in 2019, there was a similar application to the current scheme, outlined with all matters reserved for student accommodation, and that was permitted under delegated powers. There are obviously some issues that still need to be resolved, and we do recognise that there is a potential that students do cause some noise, but equally, whilst the current business that's operating the garage is doing it in a very good manner for the local residents, there's always the potential that that business could be taken over by somebody else and operate and expand in its the way it works, and could ultimately have a greater impact than the current business. So yes, all matters are reserved. So the impact of the design and amenity will be addressed at the detailed application stage.
Thank you, Anna. Now open it up to members. Councillor Fear.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. If I could, I mean, I'd want to make one observation on the indicative drawings that we see, and also ask for a piece of information, if I may. My first comment is, although the building I see there, and I recognise this is only an indicative drawing, and I think all members need to be very aware of that, but I don't see why the top story should look like a public toilet in the sky. It rather unfortunately reminds me of the development on the edge of Woolstanton Marsh with those very lurid tiles facing there. I would much rather see the vernacular brickwork go up, perhaps with a bit of design in the brickwork, but I think that I assume glossy green is just quite wrong in the context. But that's my observation, and again, I'm aware that this is only indicative. My asking for information, and I'm afraid as old age goes on, one forgets these things. Could the officer tell us, and I note the fallback position and that there is a permitted development here, and I think that too is something members need to be aware of, but we don't have any information about it there. Was that 416 units as well? Were the relevant car parking spaces there? Because I think that does make a sort of difference in terms of what's been permitted and what's being sought for now.
Yes, Councillor Fear, it was for 16 student bedrooms and not with ensuite and communal facilities, so similar, and with 8 parking spaces, although the indicative drawings were different and the design of the building was different as well.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any other councillors wishing to speak on this item? Councillor Gordon.
Thank you, Chairman. First of all, can I begin by way of an apology? My fellow councillor, Phil Rees, has in the main been the councillor, because I'm on the planning committee, but is in the main has actually dealt with an awful lot more residents' inquiries and resident letters, and actually gone out and spoken to residents who have been in touch about this application. He can't be here tonight because he's on a family holiday in Spain. So that's the reason he's not present, or else he would have spoken to the application, I'm absolutely sure. It's be true to say that this application has actually prompted quite a lot of interest and some scepticism. I think the main question that's come up is why student accommodation when the proposed development is some distance from either Staffordshire or Keele University. It's on a bus route, but not on a direct bus route to those universities. And this has also led, I think, to some concern about off-street parking. And I think the view of many residents, and this is a general point, Chairman, is that off-street parking in that particular area, as the officer has said, primarily terraced housing, has become more of a problem, perhaps since the application was first considered some years ago. If you talk to local people, what's tending to happen in Woolstanton is a lot of the elderly residents have moved on, new people have come in, and those people have 1 or 2 cars. There are no drives, so they park on the road. And if I may say so, I'm not absolutely sure that the reports that we've had and the comments that we've had back from highways take full account of the off-street parking problem. Now, I was up in Keeling Street, George Street this afternoon at 1 o'clock just to have a final look at the building before coming along this evening. And at the top of George Street, there were 2 cars parked directly opposite what would be the turning into the parking area. And I thought that makes manoeuvring quite difficult. So there is that issue. I think that the other issue is whether you could possibly get 8 spaces on the area allocated. I think in truth highways had some scepticism about that, and it'd be interesting to know what additional information was provided recently which has made them change their minds. The other big concern, obviously, is loss of amenity, being overlooked, loss of light. It is, as the officer has quite correctly pointed out, very close to a row of terraced houses in Keeling Street. I note that there are conditions to that, and that does lead me to believe that officers accept that that is a legitimate concern which does need to be addressed before really the development can be taken forward. What I want to get across is that I am by no means opposed in principle to a development on this site. I think it would be good to get something that actually gives some certainty to that particular site. It's obviously been discussion for some considerable time. I have to say that the photographs actually don't really do justice to the state of things at the back of the site. There's an old tin shed, cars parked obviously for repair, but there is some rubbish up there, Chairman. And one of the consequences one would hope of the redevelopment is it would be cleared up, and there would, I'm sure, be an environmental gain if we get the right development. Can I just also make one point, because it has been stressed by a couple of speakers, and that is noise from the existing business. Now, I've been a councillor for almost 3 years. In my experience, no one has complained. I have checked with Councillor Rees and he hasn't had any complaints. So I think the committee needs to be aware that this sort of swapping, you know, of getting rid of a potential nuisance caused by the car repair, that doesn't seem, in my experience, to be borne out in practice. So those are the sort of issues that I think the committee ought to be perhaps aware of when discussing this application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Gorton. Any other councillors wishing to speak? Councillor John Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I mean, I'd like to go for refusal of this plan application. Except of keeping in a particular area, it's, has been said, majority of terraced housing. Parking, we all seem trying to lose it with the highways, but actually highways are making a point. No, it's an outline planning permission, and the highways will respond to the next negotiation on a particular building. But my student accommodation has been said by the objector, miles away from Keele University, miles away from Stoke-on-Trent University. Have we got enough student accommodation in this town? Only today on the national news, 50%, a drop in 50% of foreign students coming to this country for different reasons. So we go back to where Keele, when they put 12,000 students they need, or they can overflow in Keele University. That's dropped right down now because of the problems of COVID and whatever. But I'll make the point again, haven't we got enough student accommodation on a bus route, which has been mentioned as 25, in Newcastle, Silverdale, in my area of Crossheath? Isn't that enough? And have we tried to get a figure on how many do we need in courses accommodation up at Keele? So really, I don't think student accommodation there in that particular place, I think in Wolstanton, is appropriate. Again, the point of 2.5, it doesn't make sense to me. It's either 3-storey or 2-storey. I mean, to me, it's a 3-storey building. I don't know the height in what's into the gable there, and for the terraced houses in Big Green Lane, what's the height, different heights? So, you know, I really don't understand this 2.5 stories. It's either 3 or 2-storey. and it's been said that it's just plunking it on top of a two-storey development is way to keeping. So to refuse on the grounds of it's inappropriate in that area of Wolstanton. I'm not going on the parking because we lose every time we refuse some on highways. We fail because the Highways Authority or the planning inspector poo-poos and says all students have got no students haven't got cars. So he's happy to go down that line on the parking. But I think in the sense, it's out of keeping in that particular area. It will clean the site up, but we mentioned today, this evening, more residential accommodation, housing, or even two bedroom flats. But the developer has going with this. We've got to take it on its own merits. But, Mr. Chairman, I can't agree to this development. So I want to go on refusal. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Williams said one thing that I agree with, which is that 2.5 stories is pretense. There are either people living on the third story or there aren't. Can I ask officers a little question about the 2019 consent? Because that was a consent issued under delegated authority. Having looked at it just now, it was issued on the 12th of December 2019, and I seem to recall being quite busy on that day and in the immediate period before it. So even had it come to a committee, I'm not sure I'd have been around to ask the question at the time. It does seem that we are constrained by it. It's not extant because that permission is now lapsed. But the problem I have with voting with Councillor Williams to refuse is that unless something on the ground or in policy or law has changed substantially, we would be doing ourselves no favours if we don't look very carefully at the 2019 permission as to what it is reasonable for us to decide tonight. In my mind, I don't like it, what we're looking at in terms of indicative drawings, and I don't like the third or second and a half story. Can our officers explain why in 2019, perhaps they can't, it may be an unfair question, but if they could, I'd be grateful for a steer on why applicants or the site owner weren't steered or guided towards a building, a dwelling place whose eaves height is the same as the neighbouring terraces, because that would seem to me to be a reasonable amount of development for the site, and it looks to me like overdevelopment. Having said which, the 2019 permission looks to me like overdevelopment, and I'm wondering if our officers can explain why it is that this application has come to us. I don't believe it's been called in. Why are we being asked to make a decision on this when we weren't, as elected members, so consulted in 2019, and what the thinking is in terms of the size and the massing of this development and why it is acceptable in its context.
Thank you. So it was actually called in. Councillor Gorton and I believe Councillor Rees called the application. Sorry, I should have made that clear at the beginning. Yeah, so it was called in. You'll have to bear with me. I wasn't the officer, and that officer no longer works at the authority, so we can't ask him exactly what discussions were had. But that scheme was also outlined with all matters reserved. It started off at 3-storey and was reduced to 2.5 storey. So again, that was for 16 student bedrooms, 8 parking spaces. The reserved matters wasn't submitted. I think it was during kind of COVID, and there were challenges to try and get things sorted in that time. So policy hasn't dramatically changed, national planning policy or local policy. So yes, that is something that we probably need to keep in mind, that what was approved in 2019, all matters reserved, indicative plans, 2.5 storey scheme. This isn't that different from that scheme, other than the indicative drawings being a little bit changed.
Thank you, Anna. Any other councillors wishing to speak? Amy Bryant.
Thank you, Chair. Just going back, and I apologise, obviously other members have already asked the question, but what is a 2.5 storey? And my other question is, off the back of Councillor Gordon's point, why student accommodation? If you can answer either of those, please.
Again, I think it goes back to the 2019 permission and what officers approved at that stage. So again, that was a scheme for student accommodation, which the applicant submitted, and we felt that it was sustainable and it complied with planning policy, and the issues that have been raised in terms of the scale, residential amenity, parking, highways, they could be kind of designed out in the later reserved matters application, which obviously never was submitted. So yes, it's a bit difficult because I appreciate there are some reservations with this current scheme, and it does appear quite a large development on that plot, but we do need to kind of consider what was previously approved under delegated powers.
Just to clarify that the restriction on the height actually refers to a maximum. So it says that the development should be no more than 2.5 stories in height. So in answer to your question about what is 2.5 stories as opposed to 3 stories, it's where the accommodation is actually within the roof space. So it would normally be where there are dormer windows. So it isn't a full height 3rd story. It's within the roof space. But it's important here just to stress that all matters are reserved, which Anna has mentioned a couple of times. So although we're saying that we're recommending a restriction that it should be no more than 2.5 stories in height, we're not necessarily saying that a 2.5 story building would be acceptable. We would need to see the design and to see whether that is appropriate. So, and I think just going back to, I wanted to make a couple of comments in response to what Councillor Williams had raised, this issue about student accommodation. The applicant came in with an application for student accommodation. We've never said that we want student accommodation, particularly in that location. I think a justification for imposing a condition that requires it to be student accommodation is that the parking standards for student accommodation are less than they are for standard residential accommodation. Notwithstanding the views of members that students do have cars in a lot of circumstances, the maximum parking standards within the local plan require less parking spaces for student accommodation. So whilst we may be saying that we've got no objections to on parking grounds for this accommodation to be for 16 students, that may be different if it was for non-students, because they very often that would be a different parking requirement of 1 parking space per unit, or even 2 if they were 2 beds. So that's the justification for us putting that condition on that it be students only. And I think although Councillor Williams raised concerns about that this isn't an appropriate area for students, if you were to move reason for refusal, you would have to be very specific about why it's not appropriate for students. So the location, if you're saying, well, it's too far away from Keele University or Staffordshire University for students, that isn't really a justification to refuse something, and neither is the fact that your view may be that there are enough student accommodation elsewhere. We would have to be demonstrating that there is harm. And so if you were to say, and obviously not wanting to put words in your mouth, but if you were to say that that this is trying to think of what it could be. If you were going to talk about parking impact, for example, if you felt that any development of this sort of scale on that site, in that location, would cause parking issues that would have an adverse impact on highway safety, then that would be potentially a reason for refusal because it's specific. Whereas to just say that this isn't an appropriate area for student accommodation isn't something that we could justify because we can't back it up with any reference to any planning policies. There's nowhere that says students have to go in certain specific areas. And some people may consider that Woolstanton is perfectly appropriate as a location for student accommodation. So, if you do wish to move refusal, it would need to be more specific than just to say there's enough student accommodation in the area and this isn't an appropriate area. Thank you.
I'll take Councillor Williams first. I'm mindful, Councillor Fear, you wish to speak on this item, but being as you asked specifics there, Councillor Williams, I'll take you first.
Thank you. Thank you. 6 years has elapsed since the planning application came in. A lot of things have changed in that 6 years. And again, I'll make that point. Whether do we change the local plan or whatever, as the amount of student accommodation and like these kind of we've got houses of multiple occupation, and then we've got the students, and we've also got these developments. As the developer sees it, you must have a business case to go for student accommodation. But history tells us only a few weeks ago, across the road, the developer came in for non-student accommodation because what we met, the excuse was that he hadn't filled his name. He's missed the intake of students this year. He's going to take up next year. London Road development on the Bristol Street Motors, the same again. We had to give permission for non-students to take up there. So the history's there, it's building up, where in this case here, and we don't know, I'm got a crystal ball, but just I've got the feeling it'll be the same. And to me, using the student accommodation as an excuse to get the development to shoehorn a developing in this particular area, and it's just been shoehorned into this particular area. Take your point on highways, and if we go for refusal, I would say it's on the highway grounds, and also has been mentioned on the height against the second story. What is the height in what's the name of the gable end we saw on the pictures there? Is it higher or is it higher than the terraced houses? Or it isn't as high.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that 2.5 or 3-story accommodation would be higher than the row of terraces behind on Keeling Street. I mean, the street scene view suggests that they're about the same height, but I know that they're a 2-story terraced row, so I think it probably would sit proud of that, sit above that.
I think what we're looking at here, because it's an outline application and all matters are reserved, the only thing that we can consider at this point is, are our members satisfied that a building that can accommodate 16 students would be too large on that site and therefore would be overdevelopment? So we've almost got to forget about these drawings that you can see and would the height be would it be 2.5 storey? Would it be 3 storey, etc.? Because we're not looking at the design and the external appearance, etc., the massing. But we can't preempt, obviously, if 16 students are to be accommodated within a building, what sort of size does that building need to be? And therefore, if members are concerned that a building of that size would be inappropriate in this location, then that can be a justifiable reason for refusal.
Got a seconder, Mr. Chairman, so.
Councillor Williams, I'll just pause for a minute while you reflect on building your reasons for refusal, because as yet I haven't heard of anything that's material for refusal. So please take this time to just firm that up a little bit, because I'm not convinced as yet. So I'll go to Councillor Fear now, because he's indicated that he wishes to join the debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's curious. I came to this committee meeting this evening thinking this was going to be quite an easy committee. Actually, both of these items are rather difficult. What worries me here is the position of the council. At the moment, I haven't, although perhaps I might like to, but I haven't heard anything which is good grounds for refusal, particularly given the decision in 2019. So once again, I mean, what our officer just said, I'd just like a little bit more information. So the previous application, which I think we should all be more than aware of, was given permission. Is the footprint effectively the same footprint that we're talking about? Because if it is, I can't see how we can construct an objection now to say that we think the massing of that building is too great, because we've already conceded that the massing of that building is okay if we're in that. Now, that's not to say, of course, that we shouldn't come back and think very, very hard about the design of this building. And one of the things I would like to see appended to this, were it to be passed, is that the design, when we get to those reserve matters, comes back to this committee, so that we don't have a design in the middle of this residential area that we think is absolutely awful and a blight upon that area. I think that is a role for elected members. But at the moment, I must say, I think if we were now to say that we didn't like this, having said that we'd liked it, I can't see. I mean, Councillor Williams says, and I take his point, that from time to time things do change, but I can't see any material consideration in those intervening years where things have changed. And I think we would be wide open to be made look fools of at appeal. Actually, we're breaking very basic rules about planning in this regard. So I'm afraid at the moment, and I can't say I'm awfully happy about it, but I'm afraid I think that this committee's hands are pretty much tied unless someone can show me why things have changed.
Thank you, Councillor Fear. Any other committee member wish to speak on this item? Councillor Hutchins.
Question of the officers, please. On a student development, how many car parking spaces do we legally have to have? And do we need to have a disabled parking space as well? So for the 16 students, it does say in one of the sections that the Highways Authority have raised concerns about 3 parking spaces served at the rear, which may not be accessible due to the lack of a manoeuvring space. So we might only end up with 5 parking spaces and 5 cars. So would that be something that wouldn't be accepted for the 16 students? I'd just like to check that fact. Thank you.
The maximum standards in the local plan, and just stressing that they are maximum, requires, and I know this because of dealing with so many student accommodation schemes, as referred to by Councillor Williams, it's 1 space per 4 students. So I think the concerns of the highway engineer in this regard are more about how usable the spaces are, as you've referred to, and has concerns about the 3 of them. But yeah, so that would be, and I think there may be, it might be extra for visitors as well, but it's probably 5, 6 spaces maximum that would be required.
Thank you, Councillor Gordon.
Thank you, Chairman. It seems awfully strange to me, you know, that the committee is bound by decisions that were taken some 6 years ago. But if that's the case, that's the case. The one thing that I did want to clarify is that I understand that one of the recommended conditions is that it is student accommodation only. So therefore, does that mean that if the owner or developer wanted a change of use, a new or separate application would have to be made? And as this application has been discussed by committee, would a second application to change use have to come back to this committee?
Application for a change of use, it would be an application to remove or vary a condition of this permission. So yes, they would need to make a planning application to do that. And it wouldn't automatically mean that it would need to come back to this committee because the committee had made the original decision. No, it would start off as a delegated matter and would need to be called in if appropriate.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mrs. Killeen, for that comment. I note that, in fact, in the report, in the section entitled, I'm afraid they're not paragraphs, parking and highway safety, there is quite a lot of stress on student accommodation as a way, in fact, of controlling the number of parking spaces that are required in this regard. So again, a change of condition, it seems to me that this has been built in as a safeguard, so to speak. Given the concerns of this committee, just as I think design should be revisited by this committee, I think that, and I'm assuming we can do this, we can build into any decision this evening that were an application made to vary this condition come forth in the future, that would automatically pass the consideration of this committee and not be delegated. I mean, is that a possible thing to do this evening? On the other hand, of course, vigilant ward councillors will be watching out for that sort of stuff on the weekly list of stuff. But I'm just wondering whether we can sort of short circuit that, so to speak, and build that in from the very beginning.
I don't know whether that we can do that because we couldn't impose a condition. It wouldn't be reasonable to put a planning condition on that says it has to come back to committee. So I think it's difficult without having a lawyer here to give a view, but my view is that we wouldn't be able to do that. But as you say, it would be on the weekly list and there would be the ability for the application to be called in.
I'm sorry, my light keeps going interesting colours, but I think it's gone the right colour now. If it would be possible, not as a condition, but just as a matter of practice, were such an application to come forward, that officers flag that to ward councillors so that they were immediately aware of it and their eye didn't slip when the list arrived.
Yes, we could put a note on our document management system that would red flag that to us and we could, contact the ward councillors.
Any other councillors wishing to speak on this item? Councillor Williams, what you've heard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Listening to the comments of other members of the committee, I will withdraw my refusal. I've got no really faith in what the highways will come up with. We don't know. Let's hope when it comes back again, they'll have a bit more muscle on their parking. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll pull back from refusal. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification.
That's all right with the seconder. I don't know.
I will be abstaining actually. I will make up my mind when something better comes forward.
Thank you for that, councillors, and I can completely get where you're coming from, but unfortunately, I think you're right. I think we're tied by a previous decision, and I think to deviate away from that risks us being exposed to legal challenge, which I don't think the inspector will be very pleased about supporting on our part. So can I go to a formal proposal then, please, from councillors? Would anybody like to come forward and propose acceptance? Councillor Fear.
Well, I will, Mr. Chairman, because I think it is necessary. Otherwise, we're going to be in an impasse, and we do need to make a decision. And as I say, although I can't say I'm very happy about this, I cannot personally see how any other decision can be made without opening us to very, very strong grounds for challenge. But I would like to stress, first of all, that were a parking variation to be there, that our officers do flag that to ward members, and that this committee have sight of the final design plans that are proposed so that we can look at those and pass our consideration on them, rather than them again, as I think happened, quite frankly, with the development at the end of the marsh, these things just sort of slipping through the cracks.
Thank you, Councillor Fear. Do I see a seconder for Councillor Fear's proposal? Councillor Crisp. So we've had it formally proposed and seconded by Councillor Fear and Councillor Crisp. Can I see support of that proposal, please, with a show of hands? Thank you. Can I see those against it? See abstentions? Pardon? 4. Where's the other one? Oh, right, okay. That item is passed. Thank you, councillors. Councillors, that brings us on to item 6 of the agenda, land at Dolspool, Betley. I take it councillors have read the supplied information. Are you content with the information to be received, or do you have any questions regarding this? Councillor Williams.
Good point, Mr. Chairman. On a lighter note, are we having a celebration? A ribbon cutting of this road? It's been coming how many years? 3, 4, 5 years? So it'd be nice to have a celebration and a ribbon across so we could cut it. I don't know about the champagne, but yes, I'd provide a bottle of champagne, yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Are members content to receive the report as written? Can you see a show of hands, please? And that's unanimously carried. Thank you. I have no urgent business. I'm not aware of any urgent business, Jeff. Officers. That brings us on to disclosure of exempt information. That's a nil. So just leaves me to close the meeting, and thank you very much for your indulgence, and have a safe journey home. Thank you, Councillor Gorton.
Sorry, Chairman, won't detain members too long. I'm a member of the Employment and Place Scrutiny Committee, and there's been references at that committee to a special planning committee sometime in April to specifically look at town centre developments. And my question is is that meeting likely to be in addition to the ones that are already calendared, or can the chair shed any light on that? Just so we can get our diaries straight, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Gordon. That has been explored. The original date has proved to be unsuitable, and we're looking for a different date, but this will be in addition to the calendared meetings. It is thought that and was agreed by the SBCG meeting that it would be better for members to look at the developments in the round to see that they marry up, etc., much to the expression of the councillors before on this matter. So it is thought that that is more appropriate to be dealt with that way. Councillor Sweeney.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Councillor Gordon, yeah, I think special is a bit misleading. It's just an extra meeting. There's so much going on. I think special, you think, oh, what's going on here? No, it's just an extra meeting.
Councillor Sweeney, all our meetings.
I know they are. I know they are. My wife says I'm very special, I think. Thank you, dear.
The meeting is now closed. Thank you.